standard Mundell-Fleming model. It is when the model was first developed, the model makes very specific assumption. Number one, BP is horizontal. And number two, you were using fixed exchange rate system. Alright, that was the standard Mundell-Fleming model. Okay, so let's look at the diagram. Okay, put in the Y1. So this is what you saw earlier on in page 34. Internal, external, equilibrium. Right, so in this case with ISLM and the BP cutting through it, right, the BP was actually initially at a state of 0. Remember, you are on the BP curve. Now, this is the size of the diagram you must draw in the exam. If not, draw larger. Okay, and this will take up 1/4 to half a page. Okay, and if I give you such a sizable diagram, please shift the curve with a sizable manner. No point you draw a large diagram, then you're going to shift half a cm of a curve. What for? Shift in a large manner so that you can see for yourself what happens to the economy. Okay? Such diagrams must be drawn in ink. Don't take chance to draw all in pencil and then kind of ask me how. The examiner, if you choose to ignore, it's on your own risk. Because it's stated in the exam guide, all diagrams drawn in ink. Alright, but later on I'll tell you there are 2 or 3 diagrams you may want to include a few pencil marks because you are not sure. But the basic diagram must be drawn in ink. Okay, so in this case, shift the IS to the right. I'll put a numbering here to guide you. But in your own exam answer, don't put the numbers. It gets a little bit messy. So in this case, you could see income goes up, which you know NX is negative, which I analyzed below. At E2, interest rates goes up, okay, which I know capital inflow. So there were 2 opposing accounts, right? One is a surplus, one is a deficit. But I'm doing horizontal BP. This is not only positive, but this is massive. If you want to, you can put in a number, say $5 billion. Whereas NX negative, this is insignificant. Okay, example only $1,000. I deliberately put very small number. You take a 5 billion where minus a 1,000 is still 5 billion. So the BP in this case at point E2 is a surplus, and not only that, it is actually equals to the capital inflow. Alright, which is explained to you in step 3. So observe the size of BP. Don't just say, oh, I get E210 already. Alright, observe the BP is a surplus and the culprit, the main cause of it is capital account. Alright, so therefore you should know. Okay, you always put a note for yourself at the side. Don't copy it in your exam answer. For BP to be back to 0, interest rate must drop, alright, to I star 1, or you can call it I1. So in other words, okay, you must either reach E1 or call it point X first. So you begin with the end in mind. You do not know what is the next step of analysis, but you know the topic is always BP must be 0. So you have capital inflow 5 billion. How can your BP be 0? You must have capital outflow 5 billion. Nothing more, nothing less. And that can only occur, right, in this case, at the original interest rate, which could be either E1, it means probably your IS might shift back, or on IS2, point X. Alright, so in other words, you need to reach point E1 of X. You don't need to write this in your exam answer, but you begin with the end in mind. Ultimately, no matter what, your answer is either these 2 points and nowhere else, because the BP must be 0. Okay? Okay, then from there you move on to the next step. You are doing fixed exchange rate. Okay, you don't have to turn to your notes because I'm going to use it concurrently. So you will always start with fixed exchange rate first. Okay, so to save space, I will actually do it here. Okay, it's typed out for you, but when I actually do my revision, I will always write out the analysis in point form. So the BP was a surplus. E goes up. It means there was an increase in demand for your local currency. Right? And I call it LC in short. So look at your BP. It is a surplus. It tells me people are sending money to buy our bonds because, right, the returns of our financial assets is I2, it's larger. So they need our currency. So there's a strong demand, currency goes up. So this is how I do it. I don't memorize. Right? What should government do if you are a fixed exchange rate? Government must do the opposite. So to maintain the exchange rate, government must increase supply of LC. So there's an increase in demand, government will supply it. In other words, government take up means government sell the local currency. Right? So as a result, money supply goes up. Okay, and the LM will have to shift down. So I don't make wild guesses and I don't memorize. I look at the size of BP, I look at the culprit, I know that money is flowing in. People need my currency. And now I am the government, I must supply it. So I use this method. You might have learned other methods in your intro class or your bridging class. As long as the answer is the same, it's perfectly fine. Right? So government will actually go to his foreign reserves, take out the Sing dollar, right? Sell it to the money changer or the banks. So money supply increase, and in this case, you can see, go to the diagram, right? You are going to shift the LM downwards. So I know this is due to the fixed exchange rate, should I say. The LM, you can put an arrow this way or this way, it doesn't matter. But what do you see? As you move along, interest rates starts to drop, which is what you wanted. Okay? Income starts to increase, but it's insignificant. So the LM will shift down, and it will stop exactly point X. Right? Okay? So in this case, you could see LM will shift down, interest rate will drop until I1 at point X. Or in your notes, I think I call it point. I have X. F. Okay? They are used interchangeably. So remember, I started with an N in mind. I know I will go back to E1 or X already. But in this case, fixed exchange rate showed me I will go to X. Because my LM will shift down, I'm going rightwards. Interest rate will drop. And this is what I wanted. Alright, and the BP is corrected. So the economy, right, will rest at point X. No more changes because the BP is 0. So bring down the income Y3. So fiscal policy in this case works very well. Alright, in the closed economy, you go from E1 to E2. But in the open economy, under fixed exchange rate, you go from E2 to X. Right? Or you can call it point F. They are used interchangeably in my notes. So we say fiscal policy is effective. So this is not difficult, right? So you have to recollect how you learned in year 1. The focus is different. I know in year 1 you are very particular to measure the shift, talk about crowding out. Not here. Here our focus is on income. We want to comment whether the policy works or not. So income was seen to be keep increasing, the policy works. So later I will make a comparison for you. So this is fixed exchange rate. So the only task of the only hurdle some of you will face is here. Government buy or sell. Once you can determine buy or sell, you're on the right track. Okay? So now we will do flexible exchange rate. So you can copy it in here. But remember, all these are typed out for you in your notes. Just that I always find that when you do analysis and you write down the steps, you will register well what is happening. So BP, okay, remember for both, you are at E2. Your BP was a surplus and your currency appreciated.